Okay, hello, good afternoon. It is afternoon, I think, right?
It is.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Conversations Over Coffee on this Erev Shmini Atzeret, the holiday that just goes on and on and on. Kind of like the song, this is the Chag that never ends. It's Sukkot, and it's the end of Sukkot, and we're happy to be together for Conversations Over Coffee. I'm thrilled to have my friend and colleague, Claire Summerless, who is the head of school of the Robbins Hebrew Academy, as today's guest. Want to welcome you to Beth Tzedec and to Conversations Over Coffee. If you have comments or questions that you'd like to raise, you can do that on our Facebook page or on YouTube in the comment sections, and we'll try to take a look at them and see if we can answer your questions. Hi, Claire. It's nice to see you. We were chatting a little bit before as we were waiting to go live. I'm just, we spoke, I think, last year too, and here we are again. What are some of the things that have changed, or what have you learned in the year past, just last year, that you're now implementing this year in terms of running a school during COVID?
Well, I think we learned a lot. I think the first thing is that everybody thought that it was a virus that was transmitted through droplets. So we had shields and all this stuff in the rooms. Everybody's desk was taped with painter's tape around it, so you couldn't move out of your little box. And it was a bit daunting for kids. And now we know it's airborne. So we did a whole change of the ventilation. We bought HEPA filters and fans for every classroom so that we could cover that. And that makes it a little bit easier for the kids, because one, you don't have this shield around you that makes you feel like you're locked in a prison. And it relaxes a little bit the notion that everything you touch if somebody else touches it, you're going to get the virus. So I think that was the first thing that was major for us in terms of changes. I think for me that one of the good things was that I learned that I have the most incredibly amazing staff, and they were able to pivot just on a dime onto online. And we had a bit of foresight in thinking, what happens if we have to go online? And I've gotten prepared, but you're never really prepared because it's such a different world. So we learned a lot. We certainly use Zoom and the different platforms that we've used much more effectively now, and have figured out how to get things out to the parents much easier and much better. So I think for a school, those were huge things. And then I think because the middle school is double vaccinated, we were able to make it a little bit better in terms of social interaction for the kids. So the only cohorts that we're allowing to mix within their grades outside are grades 7 and 8, because they're vaccinated. And we're just starting a soccer for double vaccinated kids. So, just being able to add some excitement for the kids, because it's been tough for them. And then I think the other piece that's been huge is the look at sort of the social emotional well-being of everybody, the staff included. So just trying to stay on top of what we can do to support everybody, because there's a lot of kids that when they were out of school for so long really are having some issues just as a result of that, and as a result of it being not normal, if whatever normal is out there.
One of the things that we read about frequently is how many kids in the province and the country and really around the world are not at the level where we would expect them to otherwise be in other circumstances.
Right.
Have you experienced amongst the student body, to what extent have you experienced that, if at all, amongst the student body of RHA?
I think that the teachers did such a great job that we're not experiencing a lot of it. There's a handful of kids that really struggled with Zoom, and there always will be. And so those kids, we're just looking at what supports we can put in place, because I think they'll quickly come along. if we just work with them now and put some extra time into them. But we're not seeing an overall lowering of where kids should be. We just finished doing, sort of a baseline of where everyone is, and there's not a lot of red flags out there. So I think we're particularly lucky. I also think we have this incredible parent community, and obviously these parents have been working with their children, because Zoom just isn't the same. And, a lot of times parents went to school with their kids and sat beside them. So they really were there to help out. And it definitely is taking a village to do this. But we have been fortunate that there's not that many that kind of were struggling. And we tried not to let anyone fall through the cracks during that whole period, so that we were trying to find different ways of doing things for them, getting them, instead of all the fluff that goes along with it, just the sort of basic skills that they needed to go forward, so that they weren't on Zoom all day long.
What's been the impact of the teachers being on Zoom?
I mean, I think it's really, I would not want to be one of those teachers in a classroom some days. I think it's been really, really tough for them. And as I said before, we're so fortunate, because, I mean, I haven't had any complaints. Teachers, we have a trust with each other, and we always say we're going to try it, and if it doesn't work, it's okay. We're not going to get upset about it, and we'll just try something different. And we did do a lot of things that didn't work, but we also did a lot of things that did work. And so but I think that it grates on you and it wears on you. And, they're teaching in a mask all day long. We're the COVID police. If you put your hands like this, how can you possibly be holding on to someone if you're 6 feet apart from them? And, only one kid at a time to the bathroom. And it's just a constant barrage of not teaching things, but just general kind of garbage that you have to do all day long. So I think it's been really hard for them, but we've tried to do positive things for the staff. So sending them dinner to their homes, sending them challahs on Shabbat, just finding little things that we could do that would put a smile on their face, so that they can keep going. And we also offered as much mental health support as we could for teachers. So we bought a special app last year, which opened them up to all kinds of support.
Oh, that's great. What were some of the standout innovations? On Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, I don't remember which day it was, I shared, there was a teacher, I think in the Boston area in Massachusetts, old secondary school, high school, who shared how she took her laptop into her father's hospital room while he was on palliative care. Mm-hmm. And he, I guess, was a Shakespearean teacher and of religion and so forth. And she was studying with them Gilgamesh. And so she shared that on the one hand, it's like, this could have gone, she said, anything could happen. I might have to end it abruptly, but it turned out to be a really beautiful, uplifting experience. Mm-hmm. Teaching, something that never would have occurred to her to do, right, had it not been for COVID. And I like those kinds of stories. Right. What has been the experience of RHA? Where's been, some of those really innovative experiences that the teachers have done in order to reach their kids at this time?
I mean, I think that because we're little kids, it's a little bit different than that. But they brought it into their home, so they did a lot of science in the kitchen, and the kids really had to they did a scavenger hunt at home, and they had a list of the stuff that they had to find and be ready for, and then work with it. And it was always, I think everything they did every day was innovative, because it was just so tough, and it's so boring to listen to somebody on a screen all day long. So a lot more figuring out how to do hands-on without being there and without having a partner, because in a sense they're not working together. But we did a lot of really good work also with breakout rooms. So So kids really were able to talk to each other and do things. But I mean, there's a million pictures of things that kids created, flags of Israel that they created out of stuff in the household. And we put it all up and showed it around. And it seems simple, but it's so difficult when you're not there and you're not able to help them figure out how to do it. So I think there was a lot of, it's hard to pick one thing.
Although those were quite a few things. So thank you for sharing that. Especially, we don't think about how the kitchen can really be a place of science. And so I really,
I mean, I think
when you said that, like the light went off in my head. Oh yeah, sure. That makes total sense.
Yeah. One of the things I really loved was we have a family who's very musical, and we kept getting the kids to sing Hatikva and O Canada, and we'd use them in our Zooms that we did as a whole school. And one family, they're wearing the headsets and each one is playing as if they're recording, singing Hatikva. It is just incredible. We could sell it. And it's just so nice to see. And these are little kids, early years kids singing and playing. And so there's a lot of things that parents did too.
We're fortunate to be in a community where parents are engaged in that way.
Yeah, very.
I'm sure you must have heard from colleagues, both in other day schools and private schools, and maybe even also the public schools. What have been some of the things you've heard from the larger community in terms of the challenges that schools have been facing?
Well, I think that schools are facing a lot of challenges in terms of getting kids to follow the COVID rules, getting parents to follow the COVID rules, and just I think for teachers in general, adjusting to being online. A lot of teachers balked, wouldn't do it. The school divisions have separate teachers who are teaching an online curriculum in this. I mean, we're too small. We have to do it all together. So I think that, and they don't have the support, especially in less affluent communities. Both parents are working. There's nobody there to help the kids on Zoom or whatever it is they're doing. So I think it was incredibly difficult. And I'm not saying that my community is totally affluent, but they're totally dedicated to their kids. And I think you see that come through all the time. And
before we went live, we were talking about the importance of providing hope for kids and families, but yet at the same time, planning conservatively should things change. How are you doing that?
I think that we're telling the kids that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's going to get better. And by slowly trying little things that we can do to show them, I mean, there's little improvements in the school over last year that make it easier for kids to be here, and saying that as they all get vaccinated and it gets better, we'll ease up. But we also, we bought a lot of books that just talk about things like that, and their classroom discussions that the kids are having. I sent a piece to the staff using Rabbi Sachs. He's got some great articles on hope and Judaism, and I think that they were a great precursor to getting the staff just thinking about it and how to talk to the kids about it. So we don't spend our time talking COVID. We talk about it's just different, and times are different and things are different. And so how do we adjust to what's different and have hope that things are just going to keep improving? And I think that we have a really nice culture. So the kids are pretty happy. You saw us all when we pulled the fire alarm the other day, first day of school. We managed to empty the entire building, but the kids were great and they were happy. And we were in the first week of school, the first day, and the kids were all socially distanced outside having a great time. So
my first reaction when that happens is, did I do it?
No.
That's something I might have done when I was younger.
Well, it turns out it was a little one. I mean, we're talking 2.5 free, and they don't even know what it is, right? It should have
was-
had a cover on it, and it
Yeah.
didn't, and it's just there. You got to pull it.
It happens, right? Like,
Right.
that's the kind of kid I was. If I could reach it, I'm like, if it was a button, I'm pushing it. If it's something to
Right.
pull, I would pull it.
Yeah.
I was
So,
definitely that kind of kid.
but I think you can see the kids are so excited to be back together. And we just keep talking about how we're going to stay together. And this year, it's just going to be a great year. And I think that it's really important for everybody to feel hopeful. And sometimes I think I should stop reading the news and watching CP24, and because I'm waiting to see what the government is going to tell us tomorrow that we have to change. But because it's also negative, I would love to change the news to be a little more positive.
I have to go back to some good news with
Absolutely.
what was his name? Now I'm blanking on his name. Married to Emily Blunt.
Yeah.
My kids will never forgive me for blanking on his name. To change topics a little bit, the other big news in Jewish day school education in Toronto is the Generations Fund.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, to roll out such a economic support for Jewish middle income families to be able to afford Jewish day school. What's been the impact of that on enrollment and on the school?
So I think that it was minimal this year. I think it was very helpful to some families. I think it hasn't been around long enough. Not everybody is trusting it yet and getting out there. Certainly our enrollment is up, so I can't complain about that. But I think it's going to take some time before we actually reap the benefits of that. And also, if the way it operates right now, you don't get the benefits till after your second child comes into school. You know that it's going to be there, but with your first child, it doesn't kick in. So because our entry point is at a young level, parents are kind of waiting to see what happens. But I think it's a phenomenal program. I think that it will take off very quickly. I know that we are having a meeting in the next couple of weeks to look at the stats of how many people benefited from it and so on. But a lot of what happens the first couple of years, our existing parents go on it because it benefits them. So I think you have to wait a little bit to see the greater good that it will do. So
your enrollment, school's enrollment was up significantly last year and this year. What do you attribute that to?
I added a nursery class, and nursery, that's only one small piece, but nursery is a feeder into the school, so it's made it easier to get kids to move forward. And then I think that over COVID, people suddenly became aware of how great the teachers are and what a great job we were doing. And I think the academic reputation of the school that we've been working so hard to get out there is really out there now. There's a really great buzz around the school.
One of the things that a crisis does is sometimes prevent you from thinking long term. But what are the things what do you see as being the important priorities for the school beyond just managing through COVID? What's on the agenda for the future?
So that's a good question. I was just reading the research today, and I usually use the World Economic Forum and Forbes to start with, looking at what are the educational trends and where do they see we're going and what skills do kids need going forward. And certainly kids are going to need a totally different thing. They're talking about 4 different scenarios for schools, and none of them are what you're looking at now as a school. So they're talking about them becoming hubs of learning that you learn all the time. So everything that you're doing outside of school is almost as important as what you're doing in school. And those experiences that you have are very important. And we're on a path for personalizing education, which is really what they're talking about. so I think even though COVID is here, it's really important for me to be still seeing what's out there in the future and where do we need to go. And we are just really changing our curriculum again. I mean, it's not changing it, but updating it and looking at everything through real world problems and everything through contributing to being a global citizen. And what does that mean? And so there's a lot of different pieces. We're also embarking with the UJA on a change in our study of Israel and the curriculum that we're using. And there's a year-long program that we're engaging in. So I think there's lots in the future that's going to be different. It's a fun journey.
It can also be a very anxious journey. People have certain expectations. How do you start laying the groundwork both within your teachers and your staff, but also the parents for, what you talked about basically was total disruption of
you don't do that right in one shot. That's the first thing. So I think that when I first came, we did the exact same thing. We totally changed what we were doing and how we were doing it. We became accredited, and now we're looking at that kind of next layer of what we do. So for the staff, it's a continuation on that journey. And for the parents who are here, I think that they really appreciate that and they look at it. And look, it doesn't mean that 5 years from now, this school will look completely different. It means we're on a road to keeping ourselves moving towards where the future's holding. And 5 years from now, they may tell us something different. But there's always elements of it that you did that are going to prepare you for the next step. So I think because we've been on a sort of a continuous improvement model, it's prepared us for moving. And every year around this time, I do cocktails with Claire, although these days it's conversations with Claire. And I meet with the parents of every grade. And we have a social event, usually at one of the parents' homes or on Zoom. And I talk about what is the trends in education, what are the futurists telling us, and where we're at and what we're looking to do to kind of move us towards that direction. So it's just another layer of where we've been. And I've been doing it for 10 years or 11 years or however long I've been here, 12 maybe. And so I think people are used to it and know what to expect. And new parents, before they come in, we tell them we're evidence research based, and we use that to prepare for where we go next. So I think you just have to prepare for the fact that the machine doesn't move so quickly. You can't pivot and turn that fast when you're moving a big machine. So it's the same thing. And some teachers are better at it than others, but they all come along at their pace.
What advice do you have for synagogues in terms of how to strengthen their relationships with day schools?
Well, I mean, for me, I have a great relationship with the synagogue here. So I feel very fortunate in that regard. And I think that out of all the schools that are not Orthodox, we're the only ones still in a synagogue. And so I think that there's really something positive and exciting about that. And I think that the kids leave here feeling incredibly comfortable and at home in a shul. And I think that that's so important for them. Because it's such a competitive environment out there, it's very difficult to everybody wants the rabbi to stand at the pulpit and say, you should go to RHA or you should go to wherever. And I think we need to look at different kinds of links. So I have been involved in different committees and things to try to build those bridges and see what we can do.
In the time remaining, what have we not talked about that you think we should mention?
Wow. Well, I think one of the things we haven't talked about is the rise of anti-Semitism, which is very much on my mind. And security is really on my mind as a result of that. So I think when I think about the issues for schools, that's a huge one. And how do we help kids to navigate this? What can we do that, especially, the talk about Israel being the apartheid and all of that. So I think those are key things that we're looking at, and how do we help kids to be able to deal with that and be prepared for that. And I'm sure it's the same for you in the synagogue.
Yeah, it's not just for kids. I think it's for everyone. How do we help people navigate the rise of anti-Semitism, and not fall into the trap that is the 1930s again,
right?
And that that we respond to it with seriousness and with vigor, but not with fear.
Exactly.
That's very difficult. And then the nuance on Israel is also important, because especially what I find difficult is a lot of the larger social issues that Jews want to be involved in, like racism and First Nation, truth and reconciliation, you name it. Israel has somehow been co-opted by some of those, or the organizations that generally represent excuse me, those movements, and it's been done so in a way that's not accurate to what the history is. It makes it harder to build alliances and relationships. And so how do you navigate that when, as Jews, we see ourselves as, because of our history, I mean, we see ourselves as a minority. We are a minority.
Absolutely.
but we present as white, and we've benefited in society as a result of that presentation. And so whereas we might see ourselves as closely allied with some of these other organizations, they don't necessarily see us there, both because of the Ashkenazi normative Jewish presentation, but also because of the support for Israel. And so what I find really, really challenging, and if anybody has any ideas on how to do this well, I'm all ears, because it is really, really hard, is how do we support the larger social values that we care about, and find allies with whom we can work, and also in the midst of navigate anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, which are becoming two sides of the same coin. So that's a frustration.
Yeah, I can see that, and I think for me it's really important. I think schools have a huge role to play in that, and there's a lot that we need to do. And so we spend our time talking about being a global citizen and allowing and getting kids to look at real world problems and what's going on. And so all of those issues fall into there. And how do we navigate that? And how do we help these kids who are struggling with what they think? Because on the one hand, they see themselves as a global citizen, so they have this one view. And on the other hand, we have this incredible attachment and love of the country. So that's part of the dilemma that we have, and how do we marry that together to make sure that kids are prepared and have all the facts before them in order to be able to talk.
And there's a generational challenge here too. The younger generation is very impatient in terms of progressive values, and the older generation doesn't understand it. It doesn't understand it, and then sees the rise of anti-Semitism and wonders, why are you in such a rush to go there when you should be here, starting with your own. And so that makes it all the more difficult.
Yeah, it's a tough road to navigate. I do sit on a number of committees looking at things like that. So in the education world, because it's near and dear to my heart. And what do we do about it? And I don't have all the answers, but I think we've made some inroads, and we'll continue to learn and see what we can do.
Well, that's an important conversation that we should continue at another time.
Absolutely.
At this moment, we've reached 1 o'clock. So Claire, I want to thank you for your time, for your partnership, for your friendship. I want to wish you Hasacha Rabbah this year for you and the students. And I have to say, I love being back in session. The sound of children playing is like, reminds me Uber Chutzot Yerushalayim, right? That there's all this joy in the air around here, and that makes it fun to come into work. I want to say to everyone who's joining us online, be sure to join us for Shmini Atzeret this evening, tomorrow, Simchat Torah tomorrow night, and I guess that's Wednesday at this point. And you can find out all the information on how to participate at Beth Tzedec, both in person and online, at our website, www.beth-tzedec.org. I do want to say that we are going to have an in-person Yisker. In addition to Yisker, that'll be at approximately 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. Yisker, 11 o'clock tomorrow morning on our live stream and in the sanctuary. But in addition to that, there'll be an in-person Yisker immediately following services around noon in the parking lot. You do need to register for that. All COVID regulations and practices apply. I want to wish everyone Chag Sameach. Claire, thanks again. And
Thank you.
we'll see everyone soon. Bye-bye.